Angie. Angie. Angie! Oh, sorry. I spaced. That's been happening quite frequently. I was asking you about your week. Well, you know, the usual adulting, worrying about money, and then, you know, some crazy shit happened, and then I started thinking about Mussolini, and then my phone screen got broken, and my cat got sick, and... Why were you thinking about Mussolini? Yeah, like fascism. What's got fascism on your mind? It's complicated. Well, I am a therapist. It's kind of my job to listen to complicated things. The thing is, I just don't want to be pigeonholed as like a paranoid, you know, delusional person. Well, you do pay me. I guess that's true. Well, since you're asking.
Across Europe, far-right parties are gaining ground. Last week, the anti-immigration Sweden Democrats increased their vote share as the country's third-largest party. Poland has seen regular far-right demonstrations and is controlled by the ultra-nationalist Law and Justice Party. The Czechs re-elected their far-right president early this year. In Austria, the Freedom Party is part of the governing coalition that has roots in the country's Nazi past. Viktor Orban's increasing authoritarianism in Hungary this week prompted an EU vote condemning his government. Despite losing last year's presidential election, Marine Le Pen's nationalist front retains support in France and in Italy. The popularity of the Interior Minister Matteo Salvini continues to grow.
Remember how last video I said that I was gonna cover lighter subjects? Well, I lied. I guess this is just kind of gonna become a running joke throughout the videos. When I was a wee nipper in high school, we were given the assignment to read Night by Holocaust survivor Elie Wiesel. I was a callous teen at the time and saw it as just another boring reading assignment. Until one evening I gave it a look during my homework hour. I spent the rest of the night at my desk. The horrors he described, the depths of human suffering and cruelty he witnessed and experienced, the despair and the rebirth of hope. It was all a little bit too much for my teenage brain to handle. This must have been a period of history that could never repeat itself, right? I mean, my history teacher at the time even said that fascism was something that humanity needed to get out of its system, like a flu or a cold. We had to purge it so that we could progress, whatever that even means. The way I was taught about fascism and the Holocaust made it seem like it was some kind of anomaly. And there was very, very little focus on the cultural, political, and social factors that actually led to these horrible events. I was taught the phrase never again. I truly believed that we had developed psychological and political antibodies against the virus of fascism. I was taught that we learned all the lessons that we needed to learn to prevent its resurgence. The adults had it covered, and any whisper or undercurrent would be quickly stamped out and suppressed. We had been vaccinated. For a long time, people really did seem to remember. Like whooping cough, it seemed more and more like just that, a memory. Herd immunity, however, is not hereditary. Vaccination rates, unfortunately, seem to have gone down, and our defenses are weak. Our immune system has been compromised. And unless we take our medicine, well, I feel really ill thinking about what will happen if we don't. If you, like me, go around talking about the rise of fascism today, people probably look at you like you're crazy or immediately dismiss you. Ironically, this kind of helps fascism out because it relies on this kind of invisibility to recruit, grow, and spread throughout a culture. The reason why it's so difficult to talk about fascism right now is because, number one, we are mostly under the illusion that it can never resurface again. Number two, our cultural perception of fascism is limited to the historical models, and anything that deviates outside of this, even if it displays fascistic tendencies or traits, is often overlooked, or worse, adopted into public discourse. Historically, fascism has always been really, really difficult to pinpoint because there is no single form that fascism emerges in. The form it took with Hitler and the Nazis is not the same as Mussolini's fascist party in Italy. There are many characteristics that link them and many others together under the umbrella of what we call fascism, even though they may be expressed in different ways. This was precisely what drove philosopher and cultural critic Umberto Eco to write Fascism, in which he lists all the different characteristics of fascism and its manifestations. Fascism, meaning eternal fascism, is the concept of fascism as a force that lingers within the collective unconscious. Something that never fully disappears, but arises in various places at different times in a myriad of different forms. It is not seen as fixed, but something fluid, malleable, and able to adapt to environment, culture, and time period. Umberto Eco lists the following characteristics as symptoms of fascism. Number one, the cult of tradition. One only has to look at the syllabus of every fascist movement to find the major traditionalist thinkers. The Nazi gnosis was nourished by traditionalists, syncretists, and occult elements. We see this obsession with tradition made manifest today within things like the intellectual dark web and the alt-right and their obsession with traditional elements of Western culture. Number two, the rejection of modernism. The Enlightenment and the Age of Reason is seen as the beginning of modern depravity. In this sense, fascism can be seen as irrationalism. This is a complicated one because fascism is full of contradictions. These days, we see the rejection of modernism and the embrace of traditionalism, yet there are many examples of modernism's influence on fascist thought. Not to say that modernism is the last word on anything, or that being rational is automatically, well, what it says it is. Biological determinism and scientific racism, among other unsavory things, have their roots in the Enlightenment and modernism, and fascists happily make appeals to these things when it suits them. They're kind of a mess, that's the real point here. Number three, cult of action for action's sake. Action being beautiful in itself, it must be taken before or without previous reflection. Thinking is a form of emasculation.
Build that wall, build that wall, build that wall, build that wall, build that wall.
Number four, disagreement is treason. Number five, fear of difference. The first appeal of a fascist or prematurely fascist movement is an appeal against intruders. Thus, fascism is racist by definition. Number 6, appeal to social frustration. Number 7, obsession with a plot. The followers must feel besieged.
The corrupt ideas of the postmodern neo-Marxists should be consigned to the dustbin of history. Instead, we underwrite their continuance in the very institutions where the central ideas of the West should be transmitted across the generations.
Number 8, the enemy is both too strong and too weak. Number 9, pacifism is trafficking with the enemy. For Fascism, there is no struggle for life, rather life is lived for struggle. This point is usually used to pacify the left, as there are elements within leftist politics that are anti-fascist and use violence or force against fascist movements. But a fight against fascism is a struggle for life, whereas fascism is life that is lived for struggle. Number 10, contempt for the weak and elitism. Number 11, everybody is educated to become a hero. In fascist ideology, heroism is the norm. The cult of heroism is strictly linked to the cult of death. Number 12, machismo and weaponry. Machismo implies both disdain for women and intolerance and condemnation of non-standard sexual habits. Number 13, selective populism. There is in our future a TV or internet populism in which the emotional response of a selected group of citizens can be presented as the accepted voice of the people. Umberto Eco wrote this a while back. It's eerily crazy how much it's relevant now. Number 14, fascism speaks in newspeak. All the Nazi or fascist school books made use of impoverished vocabulary and elementary syntax in order to limit the instruments for complex and critical reasoning. Are you catching the drift here? It's much easier to notice the disease when you can spot the symptoms. Fascism is not limited to any specific period of history, and the idea that it can never happen again without us actually doing anything to actively oppose it is dangerous and leaves room for safe spaces for this kind of undercurrent to grow. Liberals are often derided for throwing the word Nazi around, and the term has become an endless source of parody and ridicule. The truth is, German National Socialism died in the 20th century, but fascism didn't. It is important to make this distinction clear. Fascism has and will continue to take form outside of that specific model if we are not careful enough to catch it. In other words, even if there are no real Nazis anymore, there's still plenty of fascists. Although modern iterations of fascism share similarities with older forms, the environmental and societal paradigm has shifted, and newer, more insidious avenues are wide open to be taken advantage of. One of the common refrains of people in the far right is that they are taking advantage of free speech. Isn't that beautiful? We're so free as a society that people can just do hate speech whenever they want. The far right has never and will never be in favor of free speech. It has consistently been a shield, and with it they have hidden in plain sight all the while attempting to make their ideas palatable to normal people.
I don't know if I'm conservative. I mean, I'm a
Well, you work
libertarian.
for Breitbart, and you're a Trump supporter.
Rhetorically, they will use any position to gain an inch, and then use that to gain another inch, and so on. This weaponization of rights and transformation of all subjects into life or death struggles, and the spectacle of more and more events becoming hills to die on, causes an escalation of rhetoric, moving the narrative towards their hateful ends. Therefore, we must always remain vigilant against those who would use their rights to take away the rights of others. Fascist movements have risen to power by exploiting an endless torrent of arguments and defenses, but every time they gain power, they immediately suspend rights and persecute opponents.
Long term, are we even pro-free speech?
No, of course not. But we have to use this platform in order.
So we're being radically honest here. And,
Yes,
yeah.
radically pragmatic.
After all, free speech is one of the major tenets of a liberal democracy. The free marketplace of ideas and all that. It's pretty easy for fascists to make their opponents look undemocratic or illiberal if they put up any kind of resistance or take a stand. Britain in the 1930s was rife with political upheaval, and there was an ideological battle raging between the forces of reaction and the left. This was a period with a strong socialist movement within the working class, largely because of the failures and hardships of industrial capitalism and the strife this failure caused. However, the British Union of Fascists, led by Sir Oswald Mosley, a member of the British aristocracy, took advantage of the social climate and gained major ground between 1932 and 1938, on the same tide of corrupted populism that raised Mussolini and Hitler to power. The country would have given in to reactionaries like Oswald if it were not for the strong anti-fascist sentiments of the public. The British working classes were fully aware of the fascist actions in Italy, Germany, and the fascist coup in Spain, and they were determined to subvert the fascist internationale by any means necessary. This included disrupting fascist events and preventing them from spreading hate speech, even if it meant using force to prevent them from organizing or recruiting in working class neighborhoods. This all culminated in the famed Battle of Cable Street. The entire British Union of Fascists and their 7,000 police cronies got their asses handed to them by the anti-fascist forces of the working class. The disgraced fascists were forced to retreat into obscurity and humiliation. But exactly as Umberto Eco predicted, a few decades passed and Oswald Mosley decided to crawl out of the shadows again.
I have no quarrel with them for being Jews. That's why I'm not an anti-Semite.
But why in that case did you condone all the violence that was practiced by your supporters in the 30s against Jews going down into the East End?
Now, wait a moment. Let's look at that very closely. What meetings of other people were ever broken up by our people? It was our meetings were attacked. I'd had the largest
But
meeting...
you went down and held meetings in Jewish areas in the East End. You marched through Jewish areas.
No.
As provocation.
That's been stated again and again and is quite untrue.
Anybody...
No. All right, I challenge. I challenge.
Can you turn a camp...
all day, and it was 200,000 East Londoners that stopped you marching through all day.
Why march through?
The dockers, the clothing workers, the shop assistants stopped you, and even the biggest police force they could muster couldn't push you through.
Why did they have to
beat
bring
you
in
then,
the Public
as
Order
we'll
Act?
beat you again, and we beat your friend Adolf Hitler. Mosley at the moment tries to present himself as sweet and reasonable. He's not anti-Semitic. Here's a picture of him in 1962 with the leader of the neo-Nazi party in Germany, rapidly calling for a redivision of frontiers, the leader of the Belgian fascists, the leader of the Italian fascists, and a face, this was published in your fascist paper, that's blacked out or whited out. There it is. Who is this mystery man that you weren't prepared to show in your own paper? A war criminal? You are now busy going around Europe trying to rebuild your crooked cross international. You failed once, but you hope that the revival of German Nazis in Western Germany, the old gang coming out of their holes again, will give you another opportunity, even though you're an old, decaying element in this country.
Now you see how we had to fight for free speech. When you show pictures of me in uniform, it was because men like you came by the score to our meetings, enormous meetings like that in Exhibition Hall, London, 30,000 people coming to listen to us, which was in perfect order because we'd stopped people like you breaking up the meetings. And I did that with the Black Shirt movement, and I'm proud to have organized and led the Black Shirt movement to restore free speech to Britain.
Luckily this time, nobody bought his delusive rubbish about free speech. People remembered. Equally, people believed that society had become too savvy and alert, at least enough to see through the intricate lies within fascist rhetoric. My question is, how have we so quickly forgotten? Nowadays, more often than is not, it is liberals and centrists that do the dirty work of defending fascists and deriding anybody who opposes them as criminal. The fascist movements of the past hid behind the exact same forgery of populism, the same bad faith arguments about free speech, but the major difference is, back then in Britain, more and more people understood this. People did not give the far right the space to grow their movements because they understood that this posed a threat not only to vulnerable communities, but to the very essence of democracy itself. The question that I would really like to ask liberals and centrists is, what exactly do you think is safeguarding us from the rise of fascism today? What mechanisms do you think are in place? Is it the free marketplace of ideas? Is it the state? Or is it the police? As we've covered, this is an ahistorical and nonsensical interpretation of how fascism infects a culture. Fascism has only ever been prevented, or even slowed from its insidious spreading, by the people who actively and decisively oppose it, not by any other utopian abstraction or major institution. The same people who say never again these days are the ones who relegate fascism to the dustbin of history, without truly understanding or trying to interpret that if we don't do something to stop it, then it can easily resurface. The neoliberalization of speech, demonstrated by the free marketplace of ideas, relies on the belief that reaction will somehow take care of itself and disappear of its own volition. Those who benefit from the neoliberal system in its other aspects also benefit from its effects on speech. It relies on the premise that humans are rational actors that will always choose the rational outcome through the process of elimination. What it doesn't take into account is that the outcome of a logical thought process, deluged and deluded by false information and deprived of facts, is precisely the most vulnerable to fascist rhetoric. Really, honestly, liberals and centrists, we need to talk. Are you really convinced that fascism can never again rear its ugly head in the 21st century? Can you really ignore factors like Assad and Putin while sticking your fingers in your ears and saying it can never happen here? I mean, at the very least, according to Umberto Eco's interpretation of fascism, the forces of reaction are pretty easy to spot in the 21st century. The blind belief in an invisible hand that sorts good ideas from bad ones is the milk of the poppy that compels us to forget. I've been guilty of it too, and I probably still am sometimes. But if we forget, who will be left to defend our society, our loved ones, us? There are still those who remember, people who have learned and people who have survived it before. But in the free marketplace of ideas, those people are derided, silenced, and marginalized. And to all those who know, I would like to say that you're not crazy, you're not paranoid. You are perceptive and vigilant, and the world is gonna need your strength in the times to come. Stay brave, and keep on opposing fascism wherever the fuck you see it. So yeah, that's how I feel. Wow. It feels pretty good to get it off my chest, I'll admit. Angie, in all my years as a mental health professional, I really haven't seen a case quite like yours. The prognosis is clear. You have paranoid leftist syndrome. What? We need to get you on an immediate course of the lectures of Professor Jordan Peterson, a brilliant mental health professional, and I'm going to be ordering you a copy of his book, 12 Rules for Life, immediately. Thanks so much for watching the video today, guys, and I hope you got something from it, no matter where on the political spectrum you may fall. I'd like to say a special thank you to my Patreons. I'd also like to say a special thanks to Peter Coffin and Tia for helping me edit the script for this video. You guys are the best, and you guys made the essay all the more stronger with your input. If you guys want to help enable me to make more videos, please consider donating on Patreon. I have a new goal up, so if you would like to support the channel in that way, you can help out. I also have a PayPal for one-off donations as well. Thank you so much, and I will see you later.